The bus lurched to a stop at the gates of Fort Bragg at 0547 hours, and the morning mist clung to the pine trees like a shroud that refused to lift. 23 recruits sat in silence, their civilian clothes still carrying the smell of homes they'd left behind, their eyes wide with a particular brand of terror that came from knowing their lives were about to fundamentally change. Maya Chin sat in the back row, her forehead pressed against the cold glass of the window, watching the base materialize through fog. She was 28 years old. She'd seen things that would make every single person on this bus collapse into a puddle of their own tears. And right now, she was doing everything in her power to look like absolutely nothing special. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation-tight bun. Her face was carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that took years to perfect, the kind that came from learning exactly how much emotion could get you killed in the wrong situation. She wore standard civilian transit clothing, a plain gray hoodie, dark jeans, running shoes. Nothing that screamed, "Look at me." Nothing that whispered, "I've been to hell," and somehow walked back out. But beneath that hoodie, folded with military precision inside her small duffel bag, was a set of dress blues that told an entirely different story. A silver star, a bronze star with a V device for valor, a purple heart, combat infantry badge, expert marksmanship badges that would make most drill sergeants raise an eyebrow. Staff Sergeant Maya Chin, E6, wasn't here as a recruit. The Army's paperwork said administrative transfer, some bureaucratic reshuffling that nobody questioned because nobody ever questioned paperwork. She was supposed to observe training protocols, file some reports, disappear back into the system within a few weeks. But the truth was simpler and far more painful. She was here because she couldn't be anywhere else. She was here because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sarah's face. She was here because the IED scar that ran along her left ribcage burned every night like the shrapnel was still inside her. She was here because the Army didn't know what to do with a soldier who was simultaneously too valuable to discharge and too broken to deploy. So they'd send her here, basic training, Fort Bragg, where she could hide among people who didn't know her name, didn't know her story, didn't look at her with that particular combination of awe and pity that made her want to scream. The bus doors hissed open. A drill sergeant's voice exploded through the morning air like a fragmentation grenade. "Move it, move it, move it. You have 30 seconds to get your sorry carcasses off this bus and onto that yellow line." 30 seconds. 29. 28. Recruits scrambled over each other, elbowing and shoving in their panic. Maya waited. She counted the seconds in her head, a habit she couldn't break, a habit that saved her life more times than she could count. When the aisle cleared, she rose smoothly, grabbed her bag, and walked off the bus with the measured stride of someone who had been screamed at by far more terrifying people than the red-faced drill sergeant currently losing his mind on the parade ground. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage like this, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me take you back to what happened next on that parade ground. The yellow line stretched across the asphalt like a finish line nobody wanted to cross. Recruits fumbled into position, some of them literally trembling. A kid, who couldn't have been more than 18, looked like he was about to vomit. Another was crying, trying to hide it, failing miserably. Maya took her position at the end of the line. She kept her eyes forward. She kept her breathing steady. She kept herself invisible. But she hadn't counted on Colonel James Harrison. The colonel stood on the steps of the training command building, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching the arrival with the casual interest of a man who had seen 1,000 buses pull up to these gates. He was 53 years old, career Army, with a silver star of his own from forgotten firefight in Fallujah and a reputation for noticing things that other people missed. He took a sip of his coffee. The drill sergeant was doing his job, screaming about drop bags and improper posture and the general worthlessness of everyone standing before him. Standard fare. Nothing unusual. Except Harrison's eyes drifted to the back of the line. There was a woman standing there, dark hair, average height. Nothing remarkable about her physical appearance. She wasn't the tallest. She wasn't the shortest. She wasn't doing anything to draw attention to herself. But she was the only one who wasn't scared. No, That wasn't quite right. Everyone showed fear differently. Some people trembled. Some people cried. Some people got angry. Some people shut down completely. This woman stood with her weight evenly distributed on both feet. Her hands hung naturally at her sides, not clenched, not fidgeting. Her chin was level, her shoulders square, her breathing controlled. She wasn't looking at the drill sergeant with fear or resentment or nervous anticipation. She was looking at him with patience. The patience of someone who had stood in far worse positions. The patience of someone who was simply waiting for this part to be over. The patience of someone who had learned the hard way that screaming was just noise and noise couldn't hurt you. Harrison set down his coffee cup. Sergeant Major, he said quietly to the man standing beside him. The woman at the end of the line. Get me her file. Sergeant Major Davis glanced down at the formation, then back at the colonel. Sir, her file. On my desk. Within the hour. The barracks smelled like industrial cleaner and anxiety. 40 bunks lined the walls in perfect rows, each one a monument to the military's obsession with uniformity. The recruits had been assigned beds, given footlockers, and informed in excruciating detail exactly how their personal belongings were to be arranged. Maya took the bunk closest to the door, not because she wanted to be first in line for anything, but because old habits died hard, and she'd learned in Kandahar that you always wanted to know where your exit was. The woman on the bunk next to her was 19, with red hair and freckles and the kind of nervous energy that made her seem like she was constantly vibrating. Her name, according to the stencil on her bag, was Private First Class Jennifer Walsh. Hi, Walsh said, her voice too bright, too eager. I'm Jennifer. Jen. People call me Jen. Where are you from? I'm from Ohio. Columbus. Well, technically a suburb of Columbus, but nobody knows the suburbs, so I just say Columbus. Have you ever been to Ohio? Maya looked at her, blinked once. No. Oh, well, it's nice. Flat. Really flat. But nice. The people are nice. Anyway, this is crazy, right? Being here? I can't believe we're actually here. I've wanted to join the Army since I was like 12. My dad was Army. My grandfather was Army. Great-grandfather, too, actually. So it's kind of a family thing. What about you? Maya turned back to her footlocker. She began arranging her belongings with mechanical precision. Socks in one corner, underwear in another, toiletries in a provided bag. Everything exactly where the regulation said it should be. I'm just here, she said. Walsh's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, but only slightly. Some people couldn't be discouraged. Okay, well, if you ever want to talk or anything, I'm right here. Literally right here. One bunk away. So, noted. Maya felt a flash of guilt at her own coldness. This kid wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just being friendly. But friendliness was a door that Maya couldn't afford to open. Every friend she'd ever made in the Army was either dead, deployed, or sitting in a VA hospital, somewhere trying to remember their own name. She thought about Sarah. Don't think about Sarah. She finished arranging her footlocker, closed it, sat down on her bunk, and stared at the wall across from her. In 43 minutes, they would be called for their first formation. In 43 minutes, she would have to pretend to be a recruit, pretend to be learning things she'd known for a decade, pretend to be just another face in the crowd. She could do this. She'd done harder things. In a small office 3 buildings away, Colonel Harrison was reading her service record. Or rather, he was reading what was supposed to be her service record. The file that had been delivered to his desk was precisely 4 pages long. It contained her name, her date of birth, her hometown, her enlistment date, and a series of assignments that were so vague they might as well have been written in invisible ink. Administrative Specialist, Harrison read aloud. Fort Hood, Fort Drum, various classified support roles. He looked up at Sergeant Major Davis. This is garbage. Sir, this file has been sanitized, scrubbed clean. There's nothing here. No performance reviews, no commendations, no disciplinary actions, nothing. For pages for an 8-year veteran? Someone doesn't want us to know who she really is. Davis leaned over the desk, scanning the pages. Could be privacy regulations. Medical maybe. Some of the PTSD cases get their files sealed. Maybe Harrison closed a folder. Or maybe she's something else entirely. Get me her full file. The real one. Go through INSCOM if you have to. I want everything. Every deployment. Every action report. Every medal she's ever been awarded. Sir, that could take time. Channels being what they are. 24 hours, Sergeant Major. I want to know who I'm training. Davis nodded and left. Harrison turned his chair toward the window. From here, he could see the parade ground, the pine trees, the distant silhouette of the confidence course. Somewhere out there, a woman with the bearing of a combat veteran was pretending to be a fresh face. He'd seen soldiers try to hide before. Usually it was the broken ones, the ones who'd seen too much, done too much, lost too much. They came back from deployment with a 1,000-yard stare and tried to disappear into the system, hoping that if they could just get lost in the paperwork, they could outrun whatever was chasing them. It never worked. Whatever demons you carried, they always caught up eventually. But there was something different about this one. She wasn't hiding like a victim. She was hiding like an operator. The memory came at night, the way it always did. Maya lay on her bunk, eyes open, staring at the ceiling while the barracks filled with the sounds of 40 people pretending to sleep. Someone was snoring. Someone else was crying quietly into their pillow. Outside, a drill sergeant's voice echoed faintly across the base, some other unit catching hell for some other mistake. And in Maya's mind, she was back in Afghanistan, Kandahar province, July 15th, 0347 hours. The FOB was supposed to be secure. That was the word they used, secure, as if putting up some HESCO barriers and stringing concertina wire could somehow keep the war on the other side, as if the Taliban respected property lines. Maya had been asleep in her bunk, not so different from this one. Actually, same thin mattress, same scratchy blanket, same sense that safety was an illusion you told yourself just so you could close your eyes. The first mortar hit the motor pool. She was on her feet before the sound registered consciously, grabbing her M4, her kit, moving toward the door. Muscle memory, pure instinct. You didn't survive multiple deployments by thinking. You survived by reacting, by letting your training take over, by trusting your body to know what to do even when your mind was still trying to catch up. Sarah was beside her, Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, 26 years old, blonde hair, from some small town in Wisconsin that Maya could never remember the name of. They'd been assigned together for 8 months. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either of them could count. They were more than friends. They were sisters in a way that people who'd never been to war could never understand. Multiple breach points, Sarah said, her voice calm even as the world exploded around them. North Wall and Eastgate. QRF is 3 minutes out. 3 minutes is too long. I know. They moved through the chaos like ghosts, dodging running soldiers, ducking incoming fire, navigating by the flashes of explosions and the sound of AK-47s and PK machine guns tearing through the night. The FOB was designed for maybe 100 personnel. There were 37 people there that night, against an attacking force that would later be estimated at 30 to 40 Taliban fighters. The math didn't work. The math never worked. But Maya and Sarah didn't think about math. They thought about angles, cover, concealment, fields of fire. They thought about the ammunition in their magazines and the distance to the nearest hardened position. They thought about staying alive long enough for someone else to show up. They reached the North Wall in under 90 seconds. What they found there was a nightmare. The wall had been breached by an IED, a big one, probably vehicle-borne, driven into the barrier and detonated. The explosion had killed 4 soldiers instantly and wounded 3 more. The survivors were trying to hold a position that had been designed for 12 people with 5 remaining bodies, 3 of which could barely hold their weapons. Get the wounded to the aid station, Maya ordered. Sarah, you and I hold this position until QRF arrives. 40 minutes of ammo, Sarah said, checking her pouches. Maybe less. Then we make every round count. The next 43 minutes were the longest of Maya's life. She didn't remember all of it. The brain has a way of protecting itself from trauma, of blocking out the moments that are too much to process. What she remembered were fragments. Images. Sounds. The crack of her M4 as she put rounds into a figure climbing through the breach. The wet sound of a bullet hitting flesh. The screaming. There was always so much screaming. Sarah beside her, moving like a machine, covering angles that Maya couldn't reach. The smell of cordite and blood and burning diesel fuel. The RPG that came out of nowhere. Maya saw the flash from the corner of her eye. She was already moving, already screaming Sarah's name, already trying to push her out of the way. But physics didn't care about heroism. The rocket-propelled grenade hit the barrier 3 feet to their left and detonated with a sound like the world ending. Maya felt the shrapnel tear into her side. Hot, sharp, wrong. She felt herself flying through the air. She felt the impact when she hit the ground. And she felt Sarah's hand in hers, gripping tight, then going slack. Sarah. No response. The hand was limp. The eyes were open but seeing nothing. Maya screamed. She dragged herself across the blood-soaked ground, grabbed Sarah's body armor, tried to pull her behind cover. The wound in her side was pumping blood with every heartbeat. She could feel her vision narrowing, could feel the darkness creeping in at the edges, but she kept fighting. She doesn't remember how much longer. The AAR said 11 minutes between the RPG impact and the arrival of QRF. 11 minutes of holding a breach wall, alone, wounded, with her best friend's body lying next to her. When the quick reaction force finally arrived, they found Maya Chun propped against a pile of sandbags, still firing. Her magazine was empty. She had blood running down her face from a wound she didn't remember receiving. She was talking to Sarah, carrying on a conversation with a dead woman, asking her opinions on fields of fire and ammunition conservation. It took 3 medics to pry the rifle out of her hands. The Silver Star was for that night. So was the Purple Heart. The Bronze Star with V device was from a different mission earlier in the deployment. Something about pulling 2 soldiers from a burning vehicle under enemy fire. Maya couldn't remember the details. It all blurred together after a while. All the violence, all the death, all the moments when she should have died, but somehow didn't. The IED scar ran along her left rib cage, 8 inches of raised tissue that burned when she slept, that reminded her every single day that she was still alive and Sarah wasn't. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in the barracks, someone was crying. Maya understood. The morning began at 0500 with a traditional wake-up call. Drill sergeants bursting through the doors, banging on metal bunks, screaming at volumes that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Recruits scrambled out of bed, some of them literally falling onto the floor in their panic to comply. Maya was already awake. She'd been awake for 2 hours, lying in the darkness, counting ceiling tiles and trying not to think. She dressed in 4 minutes. Precisely 4 minutes. She'd timed herself. Because timing yourself was what you did when you'd spent years in environments where seconds meant the difference between living and dying. She was standing at attention beside her bunk before most of the other recruits had found their boots. The first drill sergeant walked past her without a second glance. Good. Invisible. That was the goal. All right, you worthless pieces of garbage. The drill sergeant, a Staff Sergeant Williams, according to his name tape, planted himself at the end of the bay. Today you will begin the process of becoming soldiers. And let me tell you right now, looking at this pathetic collection of bodies, I am not optimistic about your chances. You will run. You will crawl. You will do exactly what you are told when you are told, and you will not complain. Is that understood? A ragged chorus. Yes, drill sergeant. I said, is that understood? Louder now, more unified. Yes, drill sergeant. They were marched to the parade ground, lined up in formation, and informed that their first physical training session would begin immediately. The temperature was 47 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect running weather. Maya knew this because she checked the weather report at 0430 out of habit in the field, knowing the weather could save your life. The run was 5 miles. Maya had run 5 miles more times than she could count. In combat boots, in full kit, in desert heat that cracked 130 degrees, in mountain cold that froze the sweat on your skin. 5 miles was nothing. 5 miles was a warm-up. But she couldn't run 5 miles. Not really. If she ran 5 miles at her actual pace, she'd finish in 26 minutes. Maybe less. She'd done it in 23 once. Pushing herself to the limit during a training cycle at Fort Benning. Running like death itself was chasing her. But these recruits weren't going to run 5 miles in 26 minutes. Some of them would be lucky to finish at all. And if Maya crossed that finish line while everyone else was still struggling at the 2-mile mark, questions would be asked. Attention would be drawn. So she throttled back. She kept herself in the middle of the pack, matching her pace to the runners around her. When someone started to pull ahead, she slowed down. When someone started to fall behind, she sped up. She made herself average in every possible way. It was harder than running fast. It required constant awareness, constant adjustment, constant suppression of every instinct that told her to push, to compete, to prove herself. Staff Sergeant Williams ran alongside the formation, barking encouragement and insults in equal measure. You call that running private? My grandmother runs faster than you, and she's been dead for 15 years. Move it, move it. At the 2.5-mile turnaround, Maya noticed something. A recruit near the front of the pack was struggling. Young guy, maybe 19, with the kind of lean build that should have made him a strong runner. But his form was all wrong. His arms were swinging too wide. His stride was too short, and he was breathing through his mouth with a desperation that said he was about 3 minutes from total collapse. His name tape read Jennings. Maya filed the information away. Not her problem. She wasn't here to help. She was here to hide. They finished the run in 41 minutes. Respectable for a group of fresh recruits. Maya crossed the finish line in the exact middle of the pack, breathing easily, not even slightly winded. Williams noticed. You, he said, pointing at Maya. Tun, you look like you could go another 5. Maya kept her face neutral. Just pacing myself, drill sergeant. Pacing yourself. Right. Williams stared at her for a long moment. Something in his expression suggested he didn't entirely believe her, but he moved on because there were other recruits to yell at and other insults to deliver. After the run, they were marched to the weapons training area. The weapons range at Fort Bragg was a massive complex of firing lanes, cleaning stations, and classroom buildings designed to transform civilians into soldiers who knew their way around military hardware. For most recruits, this was their first real introduction to the M4A1 carbine, the weapon they'd carry, maintain, and potentially use in combat for the rest of their military careers. Maya had carried an M4 for 8 years. She knew every component by heart. The upper receiver, the lower receiver, the bolt carrier group, the charging handle. She knew how the gas system worked, how the buffer tube assembly absorbed recoil, how the trigger mechanism translated the squeeze of finger into a round down range. She could field strip the weapon blindfolded. She had, in fact, done exactly that during a training exercise that felt like a lifetime ago. But today, she was a recruit, and recruits didn't know how to field strip an M4. The instructor, a sergeant first class named Martinez, stood at the front of the assembled group, holding his weapon up for everyone to see. This is the M4A1 carbine. This will be your weapon, your tool, and your responsibility for as long as you wear this uniform. By the time you leave this range, you will know how to load it, clear it, maintain it, and disassemble it. Any questions? A recruit raised his hand. Drill sergeant. How long does it usually take to learn all that? First of all, I'm not a drill sergeant. I'm a sergeant first class. Learn to read rank. Second, the Army standard for field stripping an M4 is 90 seconds. Most of you won't hit that for weeks. The good ones might get there in a few days. Martinez paused, scanning the group. Any more stupid questions? Silence. Good. Let's begin. What followed was several hours of meticulous instruction. Martinez walked them through each step of the field strip process, demonstrating techniques that Maya could have performed in her sleep. She watched. She listened. She pretended to struggle along with everyone else. When it came time for practical application, Maya deliberately fumbled. She dropped the bolt carrier group carefully so it wouldn't be damaged. She took too long, removing the charging handle. She asked questions she already knew the answers to, forcing Martinez to explain things she could have taught a masterclass on. Invisible. Average. Nothing special. It was exhausting. After 2 hours, Martinez called for a time test. All right, let's see what you've learned. On my mark, you will field strip and reassemble your weapon. Time limit is 3 minutes. Ready? Go! Maya started slowly. She counted seconds in her head, giving herself benchmarks. At 30 seconds, she should be at the charging handle. At 60, the bolt carrier group. At 90, reassembly beginning. At 120, almost done. She'd finish at around 2 minutes. 30 seconds. Slow enough to be unimpressive. Fast enough to not be suspicious. But her hands had other ideas. 8 years of muscle memory took over. Her fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon, finding components and manipulating them with a fluidity that couldn't be faked. The upper receiver separated from the lower. The charging handle slid out. The bolt carrier group emerged. The firing pin, retaining pin dropped into her palm. Reassembly was even faster. Everything clicked into place with a satisfying sound of perfect engineering, and Maya's hands were still before she consciously realized she was done. She looked up. 23 seconds had elapsed. Martinez was staring at her. Several other recruits were staring at her. The nearest completion was Private Walsh at 74 seconds. Most of the others were still fumbling with their weapons. Nowhere close to finished. Maya felt her stomach drop. "Chun," Martinez said, his voice carefully neutral. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Think fast." "YouTube, Sergeant First Class. I watched a lot of videos before I enlisted." "YouTube." Martinez didn't look convinced. "You learned to field strip an M4 in 23 seconds from YouTube." "I have good hand-eye coordination." A long silence. Then Martinez shook his head and moved on, helping a struggling recruit who had somehow gotten his bolt carrier group stuck at an impossible angle. But Maya knew she'd made a mistake. A big one. Word would travel. Someone would talk. And eventually, those questions would reach Colonel Harrison's desk. The confidence course was a series of obstacles designed to break down the body and build up the mind. Rope climbs, wall traversals, balance beams, cargo nets, and the infamous 12-foot wall that every recruit learned to hate with a passion, usually reserved for mortal enemies. Maya had conquered obstacle courses on 4 continents. She'd scaled walls in combat zones while people shot at her. She'd crossed rope bridges with a 60-pound pack on her back and a 1,000-foot drop beneath her feet. But today, she was a recruit. The 12-foot wall loomed ahead, its surface worn smooth by thousands of hands. Most recruits hit it at a run, jumped for the top edge, and immediately slid back down. The physics simply didn't work without technique, and technique required training. Maya watched the first few attempts with carefully hidden amusement. Walsh got about 4 feet up before falling. A big guy named Kowalski managed 6 feet, but couldn't find a grip. Even the athletic ones struggled, their faces contorted with effort as they tried to defy gravity through sheer willpower. Then it was Private Jennings's turn. The same kid who'd been struggling during the run. Maya had been watching him, not intentionally, just out of habit. He was clearly talented, clearly motivated, but something was holding him back. Fear, maybe, or inexperience, or the particular kind of self-doubt that afflicted people who'd never been tested. Jennings hit the wall at full speed, leaped, caught the top edge with his fingertips, and froze. "Come on, Private." The drill sergeant was already moving toward him. "Pull yourself up." But Jennings couldn't. His arms were shaking, his legs dangling, his whole body trembling with the effort of holding on. He was going to fall. And when he fell, he was going to be humiliated in front of everyone, and that humiliation would follow him for the rest of his training. Maya knew that feeling. She remembered what it was like to fail publicly, to have your weakness exposed, to feel the weight of every watching eye. She didn't make a conscious decision. Her body just moved. "Jennings." She was at the base of the wall before she'd finished speaking. "Look at me. Don't look down. Look at me." His wild eyes found hers. "You're thinking too much. Stop thinking. Your arms are strong enough. You just need to believe it. On 3, you're going to pull and I'm going to boost. Ready? I can't." "You can. 1, 2, 3. Maya grabbed his boots and pushed upward with all the force she could muster, without making it look superhuman. At the same time, Jennings pulled, and this time, Something clicked. His body cleared the top edge. He rolled over, collapsed on a platform, and lay there breathing hard. Then he looked down at Maya, and his eyes were full of something she hadn't seen in a very long time. Gratitude. Thanks, he said. I don't know what happened. It's the wall, Maya said. Everybody freezes the first time. You'll get it. She turned away before he could ask any more questions. But the damage was already done. Staff Sergeant Williams was watching. Martinez was watching. And somewhere in an office she couldn't see, Colonel Harrison was reading a file that had just arrived on his desk. A file that told a very different story than the for sanitized pages he'd received the day before. The land navigation exercise began at 1930 hours, after the sun had dropped below the tree line, and the temperature had fallen into the low 40s. Recruits were issued maps, compasses, and red lens flashlights, then dropped in pairs at various starting points throughout the Fort Bragg training area. Maya's partner was Walsh. Of course it was Walsh. So we're going to grid 845,322, Walsh said, studying her map with the intensity of someone trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics. That's somewhere, right? Maya glanced at the map. 1,500 meters northeast. There's a creek crossing at about 800 meters. We can use that as a checkpoint. Walsh blinked. How did you figure that out so fast? Basic terrain association. The contour line showed a depression at 800 meters, and in this terrain, depressions usually mean water features. We follow the compass bearing until we hit water, then adjust from there. They didn't teach us contour lines yet. Maya realized her mistake. I read ahead in the manual. You read ahead in the land navigation manual. I like to be prepared. Walsh stared at her for a long moment. Then she shook her head and started walking. You're weird, Chin, but I'm glad you're my partner. They reached the creek at exactly 800 meters, just as Maya had predicted. The water was cold, probably 40 degrees, and about 2 feet deep, running over a rocky bed that made footing treacherous. Walsh hesitated at the edge. We have to cross that. Unless you want to walk an extra kilometer to find a bridge, yes. It's really dark. That's what the red lens flashlight is for. Right. Okay, let's do this. Walsh stepped into the water and immediately yelped. Cold. Really cold. Why is it so cold? Maya followed her in, barely registering the temperature. She'd crossed worse. In her mind, she was back in the Karengal Valley, wading through snow melt in the dead of night, with Taliban positions on both ridgelines and no air support for the next 6 hours. The creek here was nothing. The creek here was a luxury. They emerged on the far side, soaked from the knees down, and continued northeast. Maya kept them on bearing, adjusting for magnetic declination without thinking about it, reading the terrain like a language she'd been speaking for years. Around them, the forest was dark and quiet. Occasional sounds drifted through the trees. Other recruits struggled with their navigation. A distant instructor calling out corrections, the ever-present rustle of wind through pine needles. So, Walsh said, her teeth chattering slightly, can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Fair point. Where were you before this? Maya kept her eyes on the compass. Fort Hood, administrative role. Administration. Right. Because everyone who works in administration can field strip an M4 in 23 seconds and read terrain like they were born with a map in their hands. I told you. I studied. Chun. Walsh stopped walking. Maya stopped too, turning to face her. In the darkness, Walsh's expression was hard to read, but her voice was serious. I'm not stupid. Something about you doesn't add up. You move different. You talk different. You look at the drill sergeants like they're, I don't know, like they're children playing dress up. Whatever you're hiding, that's your business. But I'm your partner tonight, and I'd feel better knowing I can trust you. Maya was quiet for a long moment. The smart play was to maintain the cover. Deny everything. Play dumb. Keep her secrets locked away where they couldn't hurt anyone. But Walsh had been kind to her. Genuinely, persistently kind, despite getting nothing in return. That counted for something. I've been deployed, Maya said finally, more than once. I've seen things that change you. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not getting shot at. Does that make sense? Walsh nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. She paused. Is that why you helped Jennings at the wall? Maybe. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're good people. Chun, whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. The words hit harder than Maya expected. She felt something crack in her chest. Not break, not yet, but definitely crack. She turned away before Walsh could see her eyes. We're almost at the grid point. Let's finish this. They reached grid 845,322 at 20:47 hours, well ahead of most of the other teams. The instructor at the checkpoint marked their time, nodded approvingly, and told them to head back to the staging area. Maya didn't say much on the return trip, but she let Walsh walk beside her instead of ahead, and that felt like progress. The next morning, Colonel Harrison summoned her to his office. Maya had known it was coming. From the moment she'd stripped that M4 in 23 seconds, she'd known that her cover was living on borrowed time. The only question was how much the colonel had learned. She stood at attention in front of his desk, eyes fixed on a point on the wall behind his head. Every line of her body radiating the discipline bearing an E6 with 8 years of service. Harrison studied her for a long time. On his desk was a manila folder, much thicker than the 4 pages he'd received initially. Maya could see the edges of photographs, the dense text of after-action reports, the distinctive formatting of commendation citations. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, Harrison said finally, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart, Combat Infantry Badge, Expert Marksmanship qualifications in rifle, pistol, and squad automatic weapon. He looked up. Would you like to explain why none of this appears in the file that was originally sent to my office? Sir, I was told my assignment here was administrative in nature. I assumed my combat record wasn't relevant. You assumed. Harrison's voice was flat. You assumed that your record as one of the most decorated women in modern Army history wasn't relevant to your assignment at basic training facility. Maya kept her eyes on the wall. With respect, sir, the Army made the decision to send me here. I'm just following orders. Following orders. Harrison stood and walked to the window, his back to her. Do you know what I see when I look at your file, Staff Sergeant? I see a soldier who held a breach perimeter against 30 to 40 enemy combatants for 43 minutes while wounded. I see a soldier who continued engaging hostile forces for 11 minutes after a partner was killed. I see a soldier who, by all rights, should have died that night, but somehow didn't. He turned to face her. What I don't see is a soldier who belongs in a barracks full of 18-year-olds, pretending to learn things she could teach in her sleep. Maya felt the cracks in her composure spreading. Sir, I'm not sure what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. Why are you here, Chin? Really? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Maya had 2 options. She could maintain her cover, stick to the official story, and hope that Harrison would eventually lose interest. Or she could tell him the truth and face whatever consequences followed. She thought about Sarah. She thought about the nightmares that never stopped. She thought about the weight of medals that felt like chains around her neck. I'm here because I don't know where else to be, she said. I'm here because every time I close my eyes, I see people die. I'm here because the Army gave me these medals and these citations and this reputation, and all I feel is guilt. I couldn't save them all. I couldn't save my best friend. And everyone looks at me like I'm some kind of hero, and I'm not. I'm just someone who survived when other people didn't. Harrison was silent. So they sent me here, Maya continued, her voice cracking slightly. Somewhere I could hide. Somewhere I could be nobody. Somewhere I could figure out who I am when I'm not Staff Sergeant Chun, Silver Star recipient, the woman who fought 40 Taliban and lived. You think hiding will help? I don't know what will help. But I know that being worshipped for the worst night of my life doesn't. Harrison studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. You're not hiding anymore, Staff Sergeant. As of now, you're assigned as a training assistant. You'll observe, you'll advise, and when necessary, you'll demonstrate. The recruits need to see what real military bearing looks like. And you need to remember that the skills you develop aren't a curse. They're a gift. Maya opened her mouth to protest. That's an order, Chun. Dismissed. 3 days later, everything changed. The Live Fire Kill House exercise was a standard part of infantry training, a controlled environment where recruits could practice room-clearing techniques with real weapons and blank ammunition. The facility was a 2-story structure with multiple rooms, designated entry points, and role players who acted as both civilians and hostile combatants. Safety was paramount. Every round was accounted for. Every weapon was double-checked. Every recruit was briefed exhaustively on rules of engagement and proper procedures. But even with all the precautions, things could go wrong. At 0900 hours, Maya stood at the observation platform above the kill house, watching as the first squad prepared for entry. She was wearing a radio headset, listening to the instructor communications, her eyes scanning the scene with the instinctive vigilance of someone who had conducted real raids in real hostile territory. The squad consisted of 8 recruits, including Private Jennings and Private Walsh. They were nervous. She could see in the way they moved, the way they gripped their weapons, the way they kept glancing at each other for reassurance. Squad 1, prepare for entry, the instructor announced over the radio. Flashbangs deployed in 3, 2, 1. The pyrotechnic devices went off with their characteristic bang and flash. Smoke began to fill the corridor. The squad moved forward in standard tactical formation, checking corners, calling out contacts. And then something went wrong. Maya saw it before anyone else did. A tripwire device, designed to simulate an IED for training purposes, malfunctioned. Instead of producing a small controlled puff of smoke, it detonated with actual concussive force, sending a shock wave through the corridor. The sound was loud. Too loud. The smoke was thick. Too thick. And the recruits, already on edge, immediately panicked. Contact. Contact. Where? I can't see. Voices overlapped in a chaos of fear and confusion. Maya was already moving, sprinting down the stairs, her body reacting before her mind had fully processed the situation. She hit the entry point at full speed, dodging past bewildered safety officers, pushing into the smoke-filled corridor. Visibility was down to maybe 3 feet. Flashlight beams cut through the murk in random directions. Somewhere ahead, someone was screaming. Maya found the first recruit cowering against a wall, his weapon dangling from his hands. She grabbed his shoulder. You're fine. Exit is behind you. Move. The recruit stumbled towards safety. Maya pushed deeper into smoke. Her eyes were burning, her lungs fighting against the acrid taste of the pyrotechnic residue. But she'd operated in worse conditions, in actual combat, with actual bullets flying, with actual enemies trying to kill her. This was training. Training didn't kill you. Training only felt like it might. Chun, is that you? Walsh's voice, somewhere to her left. I'm here. How many with you? 3. Jennings and 2 others were in the second room. Stay together. I'm coming to you. Maya navigated by memory and instinct, counting steps, feeling walls. The smoke was starting to thin slightly, emergency ventilation kicking in, but it was still thick enough to disorient anyone who didn't know what they were doing. She found the second room. Walsh was there, pressed against the far wall, her weapon pointed at the floor in the correct safety position. Beside her were Jennings and 2 recruits Maya didn't recognize. They looked terrified but intact. And in the doorway, there was a problem. Private Kowalski, the big guy who'd struggled at the 12-foot wall, was standing with his weapon raised. His eyes were wide, his breathing ragged, his finger inside the trigger guard, and he was pointing his M4 directly at the role player who had entered the room. The role player, a civilian contractor dressed in a hostage scenario costume, was frozen, his hands raised, his face pale. Private. Maya's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Lower your weapon. That's a friendly. Kowalski didn't respond. His eyes were locked on a role player. His hands were shaking. The blank ammunition wouldn't kill anyone, but at this range, it could cause serious injury, burns, eye damage, trauma. Private Kowalski. Look at me. Lower your weapon now. Still no response. The role player was making small sound of terror. Walsh and Jennings were paralyzed, unsure what to do. Maya didn't hesitate. She crossed the room in 3 steps, faster than Kowalski could track. Her left hand came up, grabbing the barrel of the M4, yanking it toward the ceiling. Her right hand caught his wrist, twisting sharply, breaking his grip on the weapon. The M4 came free. Maya ejected the magazine, racked the charging handle, cleared the chamber, all in under 2 seconds. The weapon was safe. Kowalski blinked, his eyes refocusing. The 1,000-yard stare began to fade, replaced by confusion, then horror. I thought. You're fine, Maya said, her voice firm but not unkind. You panicked. It happens, but you need to listen to me now, okay? He nodded. We're getting everyone out of here. Single file, hand on the shoulder of the person in front of you. I'm leading. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. Understood? Nods from everyone. Good. Let's go. They moved through the smoke-filled corridor in a controlled evacuation. Maya called out other recruits as they passed, adding them to line, collecting stray soldiers like a shepherd gathering sheep. By the time they emerged into the daylight, she had 11 people behind her. 90 seconds. From the moment she'd entered the kill house to the moment everyone was safely outside, 90 seconds. Staff Sergeant Williams was waiting at the exit, his face a mask of controlled fury. Behind him, Colonel Harrison stood with his arms crossed. What the hell happened in there? Williams demanded. Malfunction, Maya said, her breathing slightly elevated but otherwise steady. The tripwire device detonated with actual concussive force. Smoke was excessive. Visibility dropped below safety parameters. I made the decision to evacuate. You made the decision? You're not the instructor on this exercise, Chun. With respect, Sergeant, the instructor was inside. Someone had to act. Williams opened his mouth to respond, but Harrison stepped forward. Stand down, Williams. Chun, come with me. They walked in silence to a spot away from the crowd of recovering recruits. Emergency personnel were checking everyone for injuries. So far, nothing serious. Some minor smoke inhalation. A few scrapes, one possible sprained ankle. Harrison stopped and turned to face her. Private Kowalski was about to fire on a role player. Live rounds. Blank ammunition, sir. But at that range, blanks can still cause injury. And you disarmed him in how long? 2 seconds, sir. Maybe less. Harrison shook his head slowly. 23 seconds on an M4 field strip. Navigation performance that suggests years of field experience. And now you're disarming panicked soldiers and evacuating buildings in 90 seconds flat. He paused. You know what you did in there, Chun? Maya kept her eyes forward. I did what was necessary, sir. You led. You saw a crisis. You assessed a threat, and you took immediate action to protect the people around you. That's not what someone does when they're hiding. That's what a leader does. The evening after the Kill House incident, Maya sat alone on the bleachers overlooking the parade ground. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed incongruous with everything she was feeling. She heard footsteps approaching. Harrison's gait was distinctive, the measured stride of a career officer who had learned to never rush, never hesitate. May I? He gestured at the bleacher beside her. Maya nodded. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the sky change colors. In the distance, a drill sergeant was marching a squad toward the chow hall, his voice echoing across the open ground. Tell me about Kandahar, Harrison said finally. Maya's hands tightened on her knees. Sir, I read the after-action report. I know the facts. I know you held a position against 30 to 40 enemy combatants for 43 minutes. I know you were wounded. I know your partner was killed. He paused. But the report doesn't tell me how you felt. How I felt. Maya's voice was flat. Is that relevant, sir? I think it might be the only thing that is. She was silent for a long time. The sun continued its descent, shadows lengthening across the parade ground. I felt angry, she said finally. At first, angry that they'd breached our wall. Angry that our intelligence had missed the attack. Angry that Sarah, her voice cracked. She steadied herself. Angry that Sarah was dead and I wasn't. Survivor's guilt. That's what the army shrinks called it. Like putting a name on it somehow makes it easier to carry. She shook her head. It doesn't. Every morning I wake up and I'm still here and she's still gone and there's nothing I can do about it. all those medals on my chest, and I couldn't save one person, the person who mattered most. Harrison was quiet, letting her words settle. After the RPG hit, after I knew Sarah was gone, I had 11 minutes before QRF arrived. 11 minutes of holding that breach alone. The report says I engaged and neutralized 17 enemy combatants during that time. That's what it says. I don't remember most of it. I remember fragments. Muzzle flashes. Screaming. The taste of blood in my mouth. I'd bitten through my lip at some point. I remember talking to Sarah, asking her what she thought about the angles, whether I should shift position. Maya's voice dropped. She'd been dead for 8 of those 11 minutes. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. When they found me, I was still firing. Magazine empty. I'd gone through 600 rounds. My weapon was so hot that it burned my hands when they tried to take it away. She looked down at her palms, as if she could still see the marks. They gave me a silver star for that night. The citation talks about extraordinary valor, about defending against overwhelming odds, about saving the lives of survivors who made it to the aid station. You don't think you deserve it. I think Sarah deserved it more. She was beside me until the end. She was the one who kept me calm, who covered my flanks, who told me we'd be okay. She lied, but she meant it. And when that RPG came, she was already moving to push me out of the way. That's why she died and I didn't. She chose to save me instead of herself. Maya's eyes were wet now, but she didn't wipe them. She'd learned long ago that there was no shame in tears, only in pretending you didn't have any. So no, sir, I don't think I deserve that medal. I think I'm wearing a dead woman's valor because I happened to survive and she didn't. Harrison was silent for a long moment. Can I tell you something, Chin? Something that's not in any manual or citation. She turned to look at him. Heroism isn't about being perfect. It's not about saving everyone. It's about standing up when standing up is hard, about fighting when fighting seems hopeless, about protecting the people beside you even when you know you might not be able to save them all. He met her eyes. What you did in Kandahar, what you did in that kill house today. That's not the action of someone running from their demons. That's the action of someone who has internalized leadership so deeply that it's become reflex. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary. The army needs people like you, Chin. Not the sanitized version that headquarters tried to create. Not the hidden transfer pretending to be a recruit. The real you. The soldier who carries guilt like a weight and keeps moving anyway. The leader who runs toward chaos instead of away from it. Maya stared at the darkening sky. Somewhere, an owl called out in the pine forest. The recruits today, when the smoke cleared, when the panic set in, they looked to you. Did you notice that? I notice. That's not something you can learn in a classroom or a field manual. That's something you are. And hiding that, running from that, it doesn't honor Sarah's memory. It wastes it. The words hit hard. Hard enough that Maya felt the cracks in her chest finally start to break open. I don't know how to be a leader without feeling like a fraud, she admitted. Every time someone looks at me with respect, I want to tell them the truth, that I'm not brave, I'm just stubborn. I'm not skilled, I'm just trained. I'm not a hero, I'm just someone who refused to die when she probably should have. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Staff Sergeant? She shook her head. I see someone who has been through hell and came out the other side. Someone who carries her wounds without letting them stop her. Someone who, in a moment of crisis, didn't think about herself. She thought about the people around her. That's not stubbornness. That's courage. The real kind, not the movie kind. Harrison stood. The stars were fully out now, scattered across the sky like a million distant fires. Tomorrow, the recruits are going back into the kill house. Proper procedures, proper safety checks, proper supervision. And I want you there, not as an observer, but as an instructor. Show them what you know. Teach them what the manuals can't. Sir, I'm not. That's an order, Staff Sergeant. His voice softened. It's also a request. Because I think teaching is what you need. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove something to yourself. He walked away, leaving Maya alone with the stars and the silence and the weight of everything she'd been carrying. She sat there for a long time. The memory of Sarah's face faded in and out, sometimes smiling, sometimes serious, sometimes bloody, and still in that final moment. The guilt didn't disappear. Maybe it never would. But somewhere beneath it, something else was stirring. Purpose. The word felt strange, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. But it was there, buried under the layers of trauma and self-doubt. Sarah had died saving her. That was a debt that could never be repaid. Not really, but maybe to be honored. Not by hiding, not by running, not by pretending to be less than she was, by passing on what she knew, by helping others survive the things she'd survived, by being the instructor that someone like Sarah would have been proud of. Maya looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the stars, beyond everything she could see or understand, maybe Sarah was watching. "I'm going to try," she whispered. "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I deserve to, but I'm going to try." The next morning, Maya put on her dress blues. She hadn't worn them since leaving Afghanistan. They'd been stored in her duffel bag, folded with military precision, preserved like a memorial to a life she tried to leave behind. But Harrison was right. Running wasn't working. Hiding wasn't working. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. The medals were heavy on her chest. Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart. Combat Infantry Badge. Ribbons representing campaigns and service and sacrifice. A record of everything she'd been through, everything she'd survived, everything she'd lost. She stood in front of the small mirror in the barracks and looked at herself. Really looked, for the first time in months. The woman staring back at her wasn't broken. She was scarred, yes. Haunted, definitely. But there was something else in her eyes now. Something that might have been resolve. "Okay, Sarah," she said to the reflection. "Let's see if I can do this right." The walk to the training area felt longer than it should have. Every step brought her closer to a moment she'd been avoiding, the moment when she stopped hiding and started being seen. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were sweating. Every instinct screamed to her to turn around, to go back, to disappear. But she kept walking. The recruits were assembled outside the kill house when she arrived. They saw her coming and went silent. The chatter and nervous laughter dying away as they registered the uniform, the medals, the bearing. Walsh's jaw dropped. "Chun." Maya stopped in front of the group. She took a deep breath. "My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Chun. I've been in the Army for 8 years. I've deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. I've been in more firefights than I can count. And I'm here to teach you how to stay alive." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Yesterday, when the smoke and the noise hit, most of you panicked. That's normal. That's expected. Your brains aren't wired for chaos. They're wired for safety. But panic gets people killed. And I'm not going to let that happen. Not to you. Not to anyone under my command. She let the words sink in. Today, we're going to work on reaction to contact. I'm going to show you how to assess a threat in less than a second. I'm going to show you how to move through smoke without losing your bearings. I'm going to show you how to control your breathing, your heart rate, your fear. And I'm going to tell you something that every combat veteran knows, but nobody talks about. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the group. Fear doesn't go away. Ever. I've done this for 8 years, and I still feel fear every time I step into a hostile environment. The difference between a good soldier and a dead soldier isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to act despite it, to make your training stronger than your instincts, to trust the people beside you more than you trust your own panic. Jennings raised his hand. Staff Sergeant, the medals on your chest, what are they for? Maya looked down at the medals, then back up at Jennings. This one is a Silver Star. I got it for holding a defensive position against approximately 40 enemy combatants for 43 minutes, while wounded. This one is a Bronze Star with V device for valor. I got it for pulling 2 soldiers from a burning vehicle under direct enemy fire. She paused. And this one is a Purple Heart. I got it because I got hit by shrapnel from an RPG that killed my best friend. The recruits were silent. Some of them looked awed. Others looked terrified. A few looked like they were about to cry. I'm not telling you this to impress you, Maya continued. I'm telling you this so you understand that the things I'm going to teach you aren't theoretical. They're not exercises from a manual. They're techniques that kept me alive when people were actively trying to kill me. And if you listen, if you practice, if you take this seriously, they might keep you alive too. She turned toward the kill house. Now, let's get to work. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Maya had experienced in her military career. Teaching, it turned out, was different from leading. When you led in combat, you made decisions and others followed. There was no time for explanation, no room for discussion. But teaching required patience, repetition, understanding. It required seeing each recruit as an individual, recognizing their strengths and weaknesses, adjusting your approach to meet them where they were. Maya discovered she was good at it. She worked with Jennings on his confidence, teaching him to trust his body's capabilities. She helped Walsh channel her nervous energy into focus. She even sat down with Kowalski after the Kill House incident and talked him through what had happened, how the brain responded to stress, how panic could be managed, how that moment of frozen terror didn't define him. You didn't fire, she told him. When every instinct was telling you to pull that trigger, you didn't fire. That's not weakness. Kowalski, that's your training fighting back against your fear. We just need to make the training stronger. The recruits responded to her in ways that surprised her. They didn't treat her with the awkward reverence she'd feared, the hero worship that made her skin crawl. They treated her with respect, yes, but also with a kind of trust that felt earned rather than given. They asked questions she didn't have answers to. They pushed back when they disagreed with her methods. They called her out when she was being too hard on herself. And slowly, gradually, Maya started to feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time: belonging. The final evaluation exercise was scheduled for the last week of the training cycle. It was a comprehensive test of everything the recruits had learned: marksmanship, navigation, tactics, teamwork. But the centerpiece was the kill house. This time, everything went smoothly. The pyrotechnics worked as designed. The smoke stayed within safety parameters. The recruits moved through the scenarios with a competence that bordered on impressive. Maya watched from the observation platform, listening to the radio chatter, tracking each team's progress through the facility. When the final squad emerged, Walsh's squad as it happened, she felt something tighten in her chest. Pride. That's what it was. Pride in people she'd helped train. Pride in seeing them succeed. Squad 3, clear. Walsh reported over the radio. Her voice was steady, confident. A far cry from the nervous wreck who'd been terrified of the 12-foot wall. Copy that, Maya responded. Good work, Private. All squads accounted for. Exercise complete. She descended from the platform and walked toward the assembled recruits. They were tired, sweaty, and grinning with the particular satisfaction of people who had just passed a major test. Colonel Harrison was waiting at the edge of the group. He caught Maya's eye and nodded once, a small gesture that said more than any words could. All right, Maya said, addressing the recruits. You did good today. Every single one of you. But remember, this was training. The real test comes when you're out there, wherever they send you, facing situations that nobody can prepare you for. She paused. When that moment comes, remember what you learned here. Trust your training. Trust each other. And trust yourselves. She looked at each face in turn, Jennings, Walsh, Kowalski, and all the others whose names and stories she'd learned over the past weeks. I'm proud of you, she said simply. All of you. The graduation ceremony was held 3 days later on the same parade ground where Maya had first arrived at Fort Bragg. The morning was clear and cold, the sky a deep blue that seemed to stretch forever. Maya stood at attention beside Colonel Harrison, wearing her dress blues, her medals gleaming in the sunlight. The recruits, now officially soldiers, stood in formation before them, their faces shining with particular combination of pride and relief that marked the end of basic training. Harrison delivered the standard graduation speech, talking about duty and honor and the weight of the uniform they now wore. But then he paused, his eyes finding Maya. Before I dismiss you, he said, I want to tell you about one of your instructors. Maya felt her stomach drop. She hadn't been warned about this. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun came to this facility as an administrative transfer. She came here trying to hide from her reputation, from her medals, from the weight of being one of the most decorated soldiers in recent Army history. Harrison's voice carried across the parade ground. But she couldn't hide, because that's not who she is. The recruits were staring at Maya. Some of them already knew the broad strokes of her story. Others were hearing it for the first time. In the week she's been with us, Staff Sergeant Chun has demonstrated what it truly means to be a soldier. Not by telling you stories of her heroism, but by showing you every day what excellence looks like. She turned her own pain into your training. She transformed her guilt into your preparation. And she proved that the greatest form of courage isn't fighting enemies. It's facing yourself. Harrison turned to Maya. Staff Sergeant Chun stepped forward. Maya's legs felt numb as she walked to front. This wasn't in any briefing. This wasn't part of any plan. By order of the commanding general, Fort Bragg, you are hereby commended for exceptional performance as a training instructor. Your contribution to the development of these soldiers has been noted at the highest levels. Harrison handed her a certificate. Maya took it, her hands trembling slightly. Additionally, Harrison continued, you are being offered a permanent position here at Fort Bragg as senior training instructor. You will develop curricula, mentor incoming instructors, and continue the work you've started. He paused. If you accept. Maya looked at the certificate in her hands. Then she looked at the soldiers standing before her. Her soldiers, in a way, the people she'd helped train. The people who would carry what she'd taught them into whatever came next. She thought about Sarah. I couldn't save you, she thought. I'll never stop wishing I could have. But maybe I can save others. Maybe that's enough. I accept, she said. The sun was high by the time the ceremony concluded. Families flooded the parade ground, embracing their newly minted soldiers, taking photographs, crying tears of joy. Maya stood apart from the crowd, watching the chaos with a small smile. Walsh approached her, looking ridiculous with her family swarming around her, but she broke away to stand in front of Maya. Staff Sergeant. Yes, Private? Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then she threw military protocol to the wind and hugged Maya. A quick, fierce embrace that caught Maya completely off guard. Thank you, Walsh whispered, for everything. Before Maya could respond, Walsh was gone, pulled back into the vortex of her celebrating family. Jennings was next. He didn't hug her. He was too shy for that. But he stood in front of her and saluted with precision that would have made any drill sergeant proud. I wouldn't be here without you, Staff Sergeant. That day at the wall, I was ready to give up. You didn't let me. Maya returned the salute. You did the work, Jennings. I just pointed you in the right direction. Same thing, he said. At least it feels like the same thing. One by one, the soldiers she trained came to thank her, some with words, some with handshakes, some with nothing more than a look that said what needed to be said. By the time the parade ground was empty, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and purple. Maya walked to the bleachers and sat down, the same spot where she'd sat the night Harrison had asked her about Kandahar. The certificate was folded in her pocket. Her medals were heavy on her chest, but the weight felt different now. Not like chains, like anchors, things that kept her grounded, connected to who she was and what she'd done. I'm still carrying you, Sarah, she said to the empty air. But I think I'm finally carrying you right. She pulled out the photograph she kept in her pocket, one she hadn't looked at in months. Sarah Mitchell, age 26, smiling at the camera with the dusty mountains of Afghanistan in the background. Her arm was around Maya, both of them covered in dirt and sweat, both of them alive. I became an instructor, Maya continued, talking to the photograph. Can you believe it? Me, teaching recruits. You would have laughed. You would have said I didn't have the patience. She smiled. You would have been right, probably. But I'm learning. The sun continued its descent. The stars began to appear. I'm not going to say I'm okay. I don't think I'll ever be okay, not completely. But I'm better than I was. I'm not hiding anymore. And I'm not pretending that I don't deserve to be here. She stood, tucking the photograph back into her pocket, and looked out over the empty parade ground one last time. Thank you, she said, for saving me, for being my friend, for being the person who made me who I am. The wind stirred the pine trees. Somewhere, an owl called out. Maya Chun, Staff Sergeant, Silver Star recipient, combat veteran, survivor, instructor, turned and walked toward the training command building. There was paperwork to file, curricula to develop, and 100 other tasks that came with her new position. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, she was walking towards something instead of away from it. And that, perhaps, was the most important step of all. She had arrived at Fort Bragg as a recruit, at least on paper. She had arrived broken, hiding, running from a reputation she didn't believe she deserved. But the colonel had noticed. He'd seen through the disguise, past the sanitized files, into the heart of who she really was. And somewhere along the way, she'd started to see it too. The medals on her chest weren't chains. They were memories of Sarah, of Kandahar, of every moment that had shaped her into the person she'd become. And the purpose she'd found wasn't about escaping the past. It was about transforming it into something that could help others survive their own futures. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the last light faded from the sky. Maya smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new recruits, new opportunities to turn pain into purpose. She didn't know what lay ahead, couldn't predict the battles yet to come, but she knew, with a certainty she hadn't felt in years, that she was exactly where she needed to be, and that was enough.